Okay, this video is from my book, The Underground Guide to Study Skills. It's a book of study skills for anybody from 8th grade through grad school. The study skill for this chapter, chapter 20, we'll talk about highlighters, underlining, and margin notes. Okay, so basically, highlighters, when I first started out in college, I would use them a lot. Gradually, though, over time, I switched to mostly using colored pens. And I used to have a 4-color pen called the Pre-Med pen. Now I prefer using something like these colored pens here. I like the thick lines because they're just easier to write with. It's more smooth. It doesn't stick. And basically, I would color code things. For example, use red for arteries, blue for the veins, green for lymphatics, yellow for nerves, or whatever was appropriate to the subject. The typical sort of rookie student paints the page yellow with highlighter. I don't like that because it kind of smells, and if everything is highlighted, then nothing is highlighted. What's also more helpful is I would just take the page and I would cover it up and I would just talk to myself. I said, okay, that paragraph says that, let's say, glycolysis. Glucose comes into the cell. It's phosphorylated to put a charge on it so it can't exit back out the plasma membrane. Then it's isomerized into fructose so that it's a more symmetric molecule because the second half of glycolysis is going to split in half. What I'm trying to say is if you can articulate the subject, then you know it much better than a student who's simply trying to recognize their highlighting. And I would often summarize the paragraph in the margin. I'd have tons of margin notes like Sergio Aragonese. Okay, I would often be making up mnemonics, writing mnemonics in the margins. This is active study and getting involved with the material. And I would ask myself the question, okay, will I remember this a week from now? Will I remember this, 3 months from now for midterms? 4 months from now, 5 months from now for final exams? Will I remember this a year from now for my, let's say, boards exam? And when you start talking to yourself that way, then you're motivated to come up with word associations so it'll stick in your brain long term. The other thing, too, is it's so obvious that when you know something, you should be able to articulate it. For example, let's say somebody says to me, Pete, can you look at a brain MRI for me? Could you imagine if I replied to them, well, please put your question in the form of a Scantron multiple choice question? That'd be ridiculous. No, I have to look at the film, I have to know what I'm looking at, and I have to be able to articulate what the findings are. Well, there's a moderate amount of periventricular flare hyperintensities, which most likely indicate small vessel cerebrovascular atherosclerotic disease. Okay, I have to be able to know that and say that. Okay, and so you should know that and say that for whatever subject you're studying to be good at it. So that's called a walk and talk self-test. To put the book down, upside down, walk around the room in a circle, and try to articulate everything you just studied. And then what's good about that is you'll remember, let's say, 4 out of 5 things. And then you go back to the book and say, what's the 5th thing that I didn't remember? And then, like Churchill had said, nothing is so firmly fixed in our memory as that which we have blundered. And because you stumbled on that before, now when you look it back up, that's going to stick better. And that gets you much better at memorizing stuff and doing good in school. School study skills have a tremendous benefit. I can't tell you, the average person I see, I feel sorry for them. They're so ignorant. They go to college and they're paying tons of money for tuition, $20,000 a year or more, room and board, and then they don't know any study skills, and they just hope they do well. Well, that's kind of stupid. You want to have good study skills. You want to walk into that room the first day of class and be the best student in the room, which is actually usually pretty easy to do. What you simply do to yourself is, why make it fair? Why not study if you're taking a class and you're starting in autumn? Why not study during the summer? Why not review a bunch of internet videos on the subject before you walk in that classroom? Why not go over your book and read it and do the walk and talk before you step in that classroom? When you have these good study skills, it makes a giant difference. You're just happier. You have got confidence. You know you're going to do pretty well. You know you're ahead of everybody in the room. You can hear everybody talking. I didn't used to talk like at all, but I hear other people talking, and I could tell I was so far ahead of them. My first quarter at Stanford, I was frightened I was going to flunk every class. I was recruited as an athlete, not as a student. I got B's and B minuses my first quarter. They're on courses instead of semesters. By my second year, once I had good study skills, I would know I was probably going to get an A or an A plus, and I was way ahead of everybody in the room in difficult pre-med classes. And that's the difference between having study skills. There's no difference in my brain. These things make a tremendous difference. It's like, why wouldn't you want to give yourself an advantage? Okay, so anyways, what else would I do? In the margins, I would make a little asterisk or draw an arrow or something to indicate something's important. I would fold over the edge of the page, dog-ear it, or put a post-it on the page. Something's really important now. What I do is I actually turn to the back of the book. I'll turn to the back of the book. Like here's a book I got a lot of post-its in, my quote book. I'll turn to the back of the book and I'll summarize the notes in the back. Look at all the notes I put in the back of my books here. I do that all the time. So I sort of process the book, and I'll make Word files for certain subjects on the internet if I need to. But anyways, the whole point of this is be an active studier, interact with the material, make sure you have some system of being able to remember it for as long as you need to. And then the other thing I think that really helped me was most students, they take a class, they hope they get an okay grade, it's like a stepping stone to getting their degree. And for most of my classes, anything to do with science certainly, I had this idea, I want to be a great scientist, a great doctor, therefore I need to really know this stuff. And what I think happened too was, because I really wanted to know it, I wasn't just trying to get a grade. Of course I wanted a good grade, but I wanted to know the material. And because I wanted to know the material, I kept on learning and retaining more than other people. And somebody who might have started out even with me, they would kind of be tapered off, whereas I sort of felt every year it became easier and easier to be the best student in the class because I always was trying to be the best, and it would just accumulated over time. And so you get better and better when you have that attitude. That's why your philosophical attitude is tremendously important. Look at an athlete, like somebody in wrestling, in the sport of wrestling. The guy who's determined that they want to be wrestling, they're going to go for it and give it 100% and learn everything they can about the sport. They get better faster. They improve much faster than someone else would. So anyways, hope that's helpful.